We are happy to have Reverend Mark Hester with us to lead this seminar on financial health and wellness. He is a Cumberland Presbyterian pastor. Some of you probably know him. He's from Tennessee, Georgia, East Tennessee Presbytery. And he's retired. He's a retired financial advisor and planner from Raymond James. If I get it wrong, he'll correct it. And he has also been a bi-vocational pastor pretty much all of his ministry with financial planning and pastoring the church. He's currently, quote unquote, retired, but we know how that is. And he's serving the Loudon CP Church in his retirement years, pretty much full time. He did an online seminar for us last spring, and I was floored at the wealth of information he provided. And as soon as that call was over, I called him up and I said, we need to do this in a lot more different settings with a lot more different people. And so he said, well, I'll be at GA. I'm happy to do it. And he's just so agreeable. And I will say that Reverend Leanne Kerner and I, she's bringing people in from the highways and the byways. She serves on the PDMT as well. We're fangirls of Mark Hester and the information that he shares. We just think he's great. So we're happy you're here, and we'll just turn it over to Mark. I will say he suggests that he go through all of his material rather than fielding questions in between, because he is prepared to answer what about. You know, those questions that come. Because I told him historically, my experience has been with these kinds of seminars, there's lots of questions, what about, or what should I do? And some of those he can answer, and if he can't answer it, he'll tell you. So, Mark, thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Pleasure to be here. Hey, it's good to see all of you, meet a few of you, and get reacquainted with some of you as well. We'll begin with a simple question, and that is, do you know the oldest form of insurance in the Bible? Hi, I'm Mark Hester. I retired from Raymond James. I was an independent for 25 years and sold my business around 1990, then sold it again in 2000, and ended up retiring from Raymond James in 2021. And always connected to the church and always connected to financial services. I like to joke around a little bit that there's more that's said about money in the Bible than heaven and hell combined. Now, this seminar is going to go fast, and it's intentional because I don't know what some of you already know, and probably most of you know more than you think you know. But I'm going to run through a lot of things very fast, and then we'll slow down. As soon as I can get through the material, I'll answer any question that you have and stay as long as you want me to. So just in a small dad humor, which I can't help but do, you know that good stewardship is important in the church when you have songs like Jesus Saves. Okay, all right, I'll let me mark those out. Count your blessings. There are more. There are over 2,000 references to money stewardship, giving, tithing, gold, silver, saving, lending, borrowing in the Bible. Over 2,000 verses, more said about money and riches in the Bible than heaven and hell combined. And that is a click. And then we'll click to the next one. The oldest form of insurance in the Bible was Joseph. He stored for 7 years and was able to feed his family, all of Egypt, and all the world, and he did it with savings. Now, there's more to the story than that. For you Bible scholars, you know that he actually made the people pay cash for the extra storage, and then the next year he made them pay in their cattle and chattel and everything that they had. And the next year, famine, he made them pay with land, so that by the next year they had to end up being enslaved. So what happens is if you don't have money, you end up being enslaved. I'm not a CPA or a tax attorney, but she's introduced me, I just had a personal interest in taking care of clergy because I come from a clergy family and I've been a clergyman my whole life, and I enjoyed working with clergy. So here's a lot of things that are very personalized for clergymen, and Being certified as a financial planner, they teach you to ask 100 questions before we give you one answer. I'm not able to do that in this format. And so some of your questions may be very personal in nature when you get specific. But if you talk to me sometime during the day, I'll be here in the morning as well, then I'll be glad to talk to you about it one-on-one. But if you ask me a question that pertains to the whole group, I'll answer that for everybody. Next slide. I do recommend you use professionals, financial planners, insurance agents, attorneys, CPAs. The last time I did the seminar, only other time I did the seminar, somebody that had listened in sent me all their stuff and asked me to do all their financial planning for them. And I said, I've retired. And I can't do it anymore. I'm not licensed. I've given up my credentials and everything. So don't send me your stuff. I can't do anything with it legally, but I'll be glad to talk to you about anything. But I recommend you find somebody that you trust in financial planning to help you navigate the waters, and I think that's important. If you rely on books and websites, it's general knowledge. So when you call in a radio show or listen to a radio show talking about financial planning, somebody will call in and says, well, I had blah, 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 and they say, well, here's what you need to do. That's very questionable because it's an answer for the masses, and it's not an answer for the individual. And but on the radio show, that's all they can do is to give you a one answer. And books don't always pertain to that because, well, what if, and everybody's unique. So that's why you need to find somebody that you can talk to. I prefer that if you're in debt, you pay the highest interest notes off first and the lowest interest notes last. So one of the important things is to stay out of debt. That's slide number 6. Are we on that? Stay out of debt. So the best thing you can do is stay out of debt. Some people recommend the snowball method. The snowball method would be to take the smallest debt, pay it off, then go to the next biggest debt, pay it off. So if that helps you from a motivational way, you can do that. But from a financial sensibility way, you would take the highest debt, the highest interest charge, pay it off first, the next highest interest charge, pay that off second, until you continue to attack it and eliminate that. And ideally, let's look at the next slide. You save 10% of your money, give away 10% of your money, you live on 80%. And 80% is what also goes to Uncle Sam. Now, just living with that goal will keep you financially healthy. About 4 years ago, you see these articles all the time, but one came out of New York Times Magazine or New York Times newspaper in May of 2019, and it said that 4 in 10 Americans would not be able to come up with an unexpected expense of $400 without selling something or going into debt. That's pretty big. So the reason that that's a problem is because you don't have savings. Next slide. How much do you need in savings outside of retirement? Well, generally 3 to 6 months of income is a good number. And what you do is you accumulate that after debt. So if you have debt, you have negative savings. And if you have savings, you have positive savings, and you want to build your savings up to 3 to 6 months of income. Now that's a rule of thumb, and everybody's thumb's different size. I know that when I was raising kids, my goal was always to have $25,000 in savings. I wanted $25,000. I hardly ever got there. This one, piano. This one, car. This one, got married. This one, college too expensive for them, but they did well. And just one thing after another. So I recommend your savings be something like your own bank that you draw from as needed. And good news, since last time I talked in the spring, money market rates are up over 5% in most places if you shop around and look at brokerage firms. I don't know if banks can compete with that unless they're a national bank. But 5% returns are out of there with a lot of liquidity, and that's where you ought to keep it. Now, if you live off less, you don't need as big a number as 3 to 6 months, and I'll explain. Let's say that your 6-month income is $50,000, but you actually live on $35,000, and you can get by on less. You're paying extra money to go to, retirement and different things like that. So you might say, well, I'm just going to build up whatever I need for 6 months of survival, not 6 months of total income. So the rule of thumb can move a little bit, but get comfortable. And basically what you want to do is become your own bank. Next slide is it says to be properly insured. When I started out in the business years ago, I was with Presbyterian Ministers Fund, started in 1978. And my wife was so proud of me for being an insurance agent that she threatened to get me a shirt with a cape that had a big I on it for insurance. And I sold a lot of insurance and helped a lot of people formulate what they needed. Well, you need to have proper insurance. You need a homeowner's policy, even if you're in a manse or a parsonage. You need to carry liability and content coverage. That'd be an HO4. You need to keep your vehicle insurance up to date. You need to carry an umbrella policy in case it rains, it pours. Umbrellas are comprehensive liability policies, and they're very inexpensive. You can probably get $1 million liability for maybe $250 a year. It's not very expensive. And you get that through your homeowner's company. Life insurance should be 7 to 10 times your earnings. And that's just a rule of thumb. Least expensive way to buy it is term insurance, and you buy it for a term that you need coverage. So I used to carry a pretty large term policy that would stay in force until after all my kids were out of college. Once you can build up your estate to the size that you can be self-insured, that need for the life insurance is less. What's the best kind of life insurance to have? Well, the one that costs the least and is in force at the time you die. All right? Now, that's why some people buy permanent insurance, but don't buy permanent insurance as an investment vehicle. It's a poor investment vehicle. The fees are too high. If you're buying permanent insurance to have a permanent life insurance policy that pays off in the future, then it's worth the premium to you, because most people don't die under term insurance. That's why it's cheap. They die with permanent. So, talk to your spouse and find out what you want to where you don't pay more than you have to. Health insurance. A group is ideal. You can shop where you live. The church, if they will provide the coverage, then they should pay for the increases. So if during the year your insurance company, and they pay the premium, if your insurance company goes up, don't make them take it out of your pay package, having a clear understanding that if it goes up, that's part of your pay package and that you need them to cover that for you. Health insurance is pretty regionalized. You may find similar coverages in Cleveland as to Knoxville, but you may find something different in Texas or in Kentucky or in California. So what you need to do is probably talk to your insurance agent, but also talk to your doctor, family doctor, and find out who they like. And I've always found that works well. If most of their claims go through Company A, then Company A is probably a good place to start. Unless you're retired, you should have long-term care disability. The denominational plan has a good one. With Unum, if I'm not mistaken, the presbytery has to adopt the plan for the presbytery. And if not, then and don't have it in your presbytery, just see how many people have to sign up. I think it's only 3 or 4. It's not a lot. And make sure it's available, because it's a good plan, fairly inexpensive. And here's the thing about long-term care. If your church pays the premium and you ever have to collect the benefit, it's taxable. If you'll pay the premium out of your pocket and you ever have to collect the benefit, it's tax-free. So keep in mind, the premium's not very big. You might want to pay it yourself. The other thing that you might want to do is do a salary continuation plan. That's the next slide. So let me give you an example, and I'll pick on Mike, if I may. And so Mike has a policy at his denominational office that says, now I'm making this up, I don't know what the policy is, if there is one, but there should be one. And the policy says, in the event that anybody who is an executive level person, in the event they're disabled, we're going to pay their salary for 6 months. And we encourage you to have long-term care disability insurance that starts after 6 months. If he doesn't have that, what happens is he becomes disabled, and then the executive committee says, well, what are we going to do? We can't just cut him off. How long do we pay his salary? When do we start paying somebody else to come do his work? So it's better to go ahead and, when there's not a trouble going on of, oh, somebody's already disabled, and then write the law, go ahead and in your church, set a salary reduction, let everybody know this is what it is, a salary continuation, and then when somebody's disabled, you'll have a policy that you don't have to try to figure out when somebody is already disabled. Good thing to put in employee handbook. Next slide. Do you need long-term care insurance? Well, if I was asking for a show of hands, you'd probably all say yes. Who would say then it's too expensive? All would say yes. So the rule of thumb, again, different sizes. This comes out of California regulations. I didn't make it up. This is what they say. If you have over $1 million in assets per person, you have enough to cover future expenses in health care. But I will tell you that the major cost for retirees is health care is number 2. Number 1 is housing. Housing is the highest thing that you pay, even though a lot of times that's misrepresented in the public. If you have a caregiver in the family, sometimes people say, well, my daughter's going to take care of me. My granddaughter's going to take care of me. My question would be, do they know that? And then you have to have insurance on them that they're willing to do that. And what if they end up with MS? Or what if they end up moving away? Or what if they're just not in good health? What if they die first? So you have to have that conversation, tough conversation. If you want to consider yourself self-insured, make sure you've got enough assets. But what happens is that if you have assets, you might use them up. Now, I know in the state of Tennessee, and different states have different provisions, you have indigent care. Picture going to a nursing home, and the scripture was where Jesus went down to the pool at Bethsaida, and everybody's moaning and groaning. And that's the indigent care nursing homes, and there's 3 to a room, and it smells bad, and typically, and it's a very difficult place to be. Well, even if you end up going to something like that under state care, then the state's fixing to apply the bill to your estate to collect it after you're gone. So it could be against your house, it could be your car, it could be whatever else you intended your family to get. So you might look at long-term care. One of the options here is to buy life insurance instead of traditional long-term care. Traditional long-term care typically is something that you pay on the rest of your life. Now, if you want to double up on premiums, there are some companies out there that let you pay like 10 years of premiums and then you're paid up, but you're paying double premium to get it. I know one company that did that was Prudential. They no longer sell long-term care. They'll service their contracts, but they won't sell it. So they may be hard to find, but getting something paid up before you retire is big. But the most popular, I think, if you can afford it and justify it, is buying a permanent life insurance policy that converts to long-term care if you need it. If you don't need it, it stays death benefit. If you die, your family still gets the money. If you go in a nursing home, then it converts to long-term care and you get the money that way. And if you pay enough for the premium, then you can pay 10 years, it's paid up, and after 10 years, if you don't want it, you can get all your money back. Sound too good to be true? Well, it almost is, except they don't give you your interest for all the money that you've paid out. You don't make, they make all the interest off of it. And so that's available. Last time I looked, when I was in the business, Lincoln and Allstate and Pacific Life were 3 carriers that I know had that. Now, if I was still licensed and registered, I wouldn't be able to say that without giving you all the disclosures, but guess what? I'm not licensed anymore. Next slide. Social Security, Medicare, biggest insurer, provider of benefits. How many people have an account with Social Security? Good, excellent. SSA.gov, go sign up, get my account. You check annually. When's a good day to check? Your birthday. It's a great day to check because you'll always remember, now, what do I need to do on my birthday? I know, I'll check and make sure. And what you want to know is that it's correct because you don't want to find the year that you're planning on retiring that they missed your income for 3 years and then try to get it fixed. So just check every year, make sure they've got the estimate correct. It's going up. You can see your Social Security statement. You can get a replacement card. Full retirement age, FRA, you'll see a lot, acronyms with the government, is 67. So if you're born after 1960, full retirement age is 67. When do you take Social Security? Next slide. When do you take Social Security retirement? Well, I found this in Numbers 8:25. At the age of 50, they must retire from their regular service and work no longer. Okay, so highlight that, bold it. And guess who said it? Moses. And Moses worked for 120 years until he died. So in the creation story, God says we're to work 6 days, rest on the Sabbath. but he never gives us an indication that we can retire. So I'm not sure how that got in there. The rule of thumb is the person who makes the most money wait the longest to start drawing Social Security, because it will continue to go up about 8% per year every year you delay. And once you stop, it will only go up with inflation if the government approves inflation. So those are pretty hefty increases. Some people want to start drawing early. Do the math, have a financial planner do the math. It usually takes about a dozen years before it was better to have waited. And you might not feel you live that long, or maybe you need the money and you want to start. But if you're planning on starting at 65, my advice is make it 66. If you're planning on starting at 63, make it 64. If you can just extend it a little bit, that's a guaranteed 8% increase in a pension. That's pretty strong. 40 quarters, 10 years, doesn't have to be consecutive, gets you fully insured. Even if you've opted out, I don't know if anybody here has opted out of Social Security, which ministers had the option to do when they were newly ordained, you might still have benefits. If you work for 40 quarters prior to opting out, you still may have Social Security. And get this, you still might qualify for Medicare when you retire without having to pay for it. So if you have questions on that, I'll be glad to tell you about it. Now, non-working spouses or working spouses, if you're both working, then what happens is that you draw Social Security off of each one of your earnings. If in the event that you are a non-working spouse or didn't work a lot of hours, then you will draw as the non-working spouse or something that didn't have high benefits half of what the working spouse is drawing, assuming you're the same age. If the spouse is younger by 3 or 4 years, then it'd be half less 8% a year. If they're older, it'll be half. It might be plus 8%. Following? So you still draw that. And in the event that, Cliff, you pass away, what does your wife get? She gets your amount or hers, whichever's greater. Actually, they inflate hers if it's lower to your amount, and then that's what the spouse draws from then on. Next slide. Will Social Security last? Yeah, it'll last. I imagine the benefits will continue to go down. Taxes will go up. Minimum retirement age will go up, which we're seeing already. There'll be more testing into Medicare approvals. If you're over 65 like I am, when you go to the doctor now, you have to have the safety check, right? And my wife and I have an agreement that when we go separately to get our safety checks, that we'll lie and say that we're safe in the home. Well, there's a lot more that could be said about Medicare plans, but again, talk to a local insurance agent about your options, about Medicare supplements, because there's a lot of differences in regions and geographical areas, and I'll be glad to give you some recommendations. Or if you're in an area, I could tell you, I was licensed in 26 states, but you may be in a state I never worked in, and I couldn't tell you what to do. Next slide. Where you live is very important to your financial security. And I'm not saying this so that you will say, well, I want to work in Tennessee, which is a great state to live and work in. But what's important is the state income tax in Kentucky and Texas is 5%. There's no state income tax in Tennessee. City and county sales tax have an impact. If you live in Boston, it's almost 11%. If you live in Nashville and Knoxville, it's 9.25%. If you live in Memphis, Cleveland, or Murfreesboro, add another 50 bips, which is BPS is basis points. Utilities cost more in some regions. Do you want a manse? Do you want a house? Some states provide free tuition to high school students to go to their state schools. The median income in Loudon, where I serve as pastor, that's a county southwest of Knoxville, the average income in that county is $76,000. But in Memphis, 400 miles west of there, the median income, do you know, is $65,000. So there's $11,000 discrepancy. The best offers may not provide the best lifestyle. And so I'm not saying that we should make our decision of call of where we go based on economics, but I do want you to recognize that if you are called to go into some other area, that you make sure that it's on equal standards. I wouldn't want you to move and find out, oh, I didn't know I was going to have to pay this and pay that and pay this. So it's something that needs to be in your pay package and communicated up front. So let's go to the next slide and look at minister's pay package. Minister's pay package is for the minister, and they don't have to be ordained. They can be commissioned, licensed, or do some kind of administration of sacraments, the sacerdotal stuff, lead church and religion, conduct services, take responsibility, management of conduct, maintenance of the church. There was a private letter ruling in Texas some years ago by a CP, by the way, not who approved it, but who challenged the IRS, that they could receive the ministerial housing allowance if they were a licensed candidate, and the answer was yes. So now it's been broadened to be able to include a lot of those people who carry that responsibility. Clergy are always self-employed for Social Security. Where is my church treasurer that came in? Right there. All right, clergy have the option of drawing Social Security or not, but the IRS says employees are always federal income tax. Clergy are self-employed for Social Security. Clergy have the option of opting out of Social Security, Form 4361, but it's not recommended. I doubt anybody in our church could truthfully say that they don't accept any government help based on religious principles. But I've counseled people in the past who opted out to get back in if they could. 1099s don't have to be used for part-time clergy. You don't have to take a 1099. If you're taking your income as part-time clergy as housing, you don't even have to get a 1099 unless the church just wants to. Housing allowances have been around since 1921. And pay packages can reflect actual expense incurred or fair rental value, FRV, whichever's less. Your church has to approve it in writing. So let's talk about that for a minute. You're supposed to request that to the session for approval before the end of the year, and then you can take that amount of money the next year. So you can do the actual expenses incurred, or you can do fair rental value, whichever's less. That's something that if you miss the cutoff, it's not in concrete. If you go into January, February, whatever, and haven't done it yet, you can say, wait, I missed that. I need the session to approve this. But you can only approve going forward. You can't go and approve what had happened in the past. Part-time clergy can take 100% of their income as housing. But listen, you can only do that if you have that set up. So if I went to work as one of my 14 interims that I did, and I started in June, I can't go there in June and say, just pay me in housing allowance. If I'm going to claim it as housing, it's got to be in their session minutes. Retired clergy can take housing allowance from the denomination plan, and by the way, that includes a down payment on assisted living. It can also cover some of your long-term care costs and things like that. So be sure and read the fine print of what's available. I'll give you a source here in a minute. Housing expenses include down payment, loan payment, real estate tax, insurance, utilities, internet, furnishings, appliances, structural repairs, yard maintenance, improvements, my cats, and no, that's not in there, and homeowners association fees. And the tip here is to keep a journal, because at the end of the year, you want to be able to prove to yourself, if you're audited for the IRS, or to your CPA, they may ask for it, probably will, for your actual expenses, and compare that to fair rental value. I think fair rental value, the next slide, Pam, I think the fair rental value says something that is going to be challenged and probably is not valid anymore, but it's currently the law. And that is that, and it won't matter, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Currently, it's 1% of home value. Well, you know what's happened with home values. They've gone up so high. So let's say that you have a $400,000 house, then 1% says you can take $4,000 a month as housing allowance. Well, the reason I don't think it'll matter is because if you've only spent $2,000 a month for your home, that's all you can take off. Remember, it's the lesser of the two, of what you've spent or fair rental value. But fair rental value numbers right now are crazy. Next slide. What income is reportable? So if you're receiving a check when you fill a pulpit or preach a revival, lead a workshop, teach a class, you cannot take it as housing unless you request it ahead of time that you want to take it as housing. Otherwise, you're supposed to report it as earnings. If you live in a manse, your manse is not reported as income. If you have a retirement money in a 403B, like a denominational plan, distributions can be made as housing. So I've told people for years that you want to keep some of your money in a denominational plan, And I can tell you, depending on your circumstances, how much that I would recommend. But that's because you can take the cost of retirement homes for the entrance fee, monthly fees, maintenance fees, housing, but you can't take more than is fair rental value or the lesser of actual expense incurred. So if you're still working, like I am, and I'm taking some of my income from Loudness Housing, which I am, I can't take money out of the CP plan as housing because I'm already maxed out on housing. But that is something that's available that's not available outside a denominational plan. But there are ways to invest outside and put some back if you need to. That's something a financial planner can help you with. Next slide. Other salary reduction options include insurances, your tithe. Ministers have the option to go ahead and put it in the budget. I'm going to put $4,500 a year into offering. Just go ahead and deduct it from my salary. They can actually take that and do that. I personally like putting it in the offering plate, so I've never done that, but I have some people doing that. Business reimbursable expense, health savings account, cafeteria plans if you have multi-staff, all those are available. Even deductions can be made for student debt. So if anybody here has student debt that's not forgiven or ready to be forgiven, one of the options is to go to your treasurer and your church and you say, you know what, if you guys will help me with my debts, I'll work, 47 years more for you, or let them take some of your salary, reduce it, and make the payments for you to reduce your salary. That's all eligible. Talk to CPAs about that. Next slide. Retirement. Here's the key. You start early, you be disciplined, you use the market, you match the match, you use catch-up, you use tax-free, then tax-deferred, then tax-favored in that order. Tax-free, tax-deferred, those are three different things. Let's talk about tax-free first. It used to be that the only thing I'd recommend to people, ministers, were 403Bs. And then came Ross. And I can show you mathematically, if there was time, why a Roth is the same out of your pocket as an IRA. It's just when does it affect you? And so they're very smart, and it's a way for IRS to get their money early because they're going to have to go ahead and pay taxes on it. But you never pay tax on it again. There's a $6,500 cap in the 2023. Are these on the board? Good. And can do less. Catch up, meaning you can put in more than $6,500 if you're age 50 or older, up to $1,000 more. You never pay tax on the gain. You don't pay tax on the distribution. You're never required to take it out. You pass it tax-free to your heirs. You add money as long as you have income. That's fairly new. That came out of the Secure Act last year. You can add money. You don't have to cut off at 70 like it used to, as long as you have earnings. Does not reduce your Social Security earnings. And you have privacy from the church, which sometimes is not a big deal. And I grew up with the church budget being on the bulletin board, and everybody knew what my dad made. So it's no big deal to me, but some people like that privacy of knowing that you can save money without public eye. Use mutual funds. That's really the best unless you're, an investment person that has a lot of experience. If you're a novice and you don't have time to mess with it, then that's kind of like my golf game. The better thing to do is stay in a balanced approach. The closer you get to retirement, the more conservative you want to be. And there are plans out there that can target years. For example, Pam, if you are 40 years from retirement and you want to pick a fund that is from 2023 and say, I want a 2063 fund, it'll keep you aggressive now. And as you get closer to retirement, become more conservative. Those aren't necessarily the best things to do, but if you're not going to do anything with it, you're going to buy it, leave it, sit on it, it's not a bad thing to do. And those are called target funds. Next slide. What's the best tax-deferred option for clergy? And that would be 403Bs, also called TSAs or tax sheltered agreement. And by the way, we have another term for TSA. Those are the people that check you as you go into the airport. And so when I was coming through Knoxville to get here yesterday, I got caught and I had to be frisked. The officer kept saying I was alarming. And so fortunately, I got by that and got all my things back and I got here. Next slide, 403B or TSAs. must be a salary reduction agreement. You can't put money in yourself into a 403B. It has to come through your employer. It has to be salary reduction. It cannot be private. Employer has to put money in for you. You can put in up to $22,500 a year. Catch up is up to $7,500. That goes up, has traditionally every year. You can invest privately in a 403B or use denominational plan. Why do we want to use the denominational plan? Why do you not want to use the denominational plan? Well, you have more options. You've got 10,000 options, whereas in the denominational plan, it's a plan that, all the options are picked for you. You may want to be in a different type of investment. Let's say you said to me when I was working, I'd like to have something in healthcare. I'd like to buy something in Tesla stock. Well, you can do whatever you want to do, or I don't like to be as aggressive as the CP plan is, who buys a lot of GT Global investments that are long-term investments where you get stuck in them for a while. True, but there are advantages to having both, and that's something that you just have to work out with your advisor. Can pass tax deferred to the spouse, but not to the non-clergy. For example, I've got a TSA and a 403B, and I can draw that as housing as long as I live, but when I die, my wife, who's not ordained, cannot. So she'll have to take that as an IRA and have to pay tax on it on distributions. Next slide, traditional IRAs. How many people in here have a traditional IRA? Really? I thought everybody would. Well, a traditional IRA is something that became popular at one time, and it's a very good tax-deferred option. You can add, again, like the Roth, up to $6,500 a person, catch up $1,000, can add for the prior year, also true with Roths. So in a 403B, you can only put in money that you agree is going to go in there in that calendar year. But for IRAs and Roths, you can, up until tax date of the year that you're living in, you can go back to the year before and add it. So sometimes that's a real advantage. You can use mutual funds geared to risk tolerance, again, pass tax deferred to your spouse, but now taxable to the estate. And that's changed. It used to be that you could take an IRA and somebody could keep it, an IRA, and just take distributions on it for life. No longer available. Now, if it's spouse to spouse, you can delay, but if it's spouse to a child, for example, they have to go ahead and take distributions. Next slide, tax favored. So we have, something that's tax-free, we have something tax-deferred, and now we have something tax-favored. So here's your third option. Tax-free municipal bonds, you can't take it off your income tax, neither can you with Roths, but the interest grows tax-free. Tax-managed mutual funds do exist. There are a few companies that are very good at them. Van Campen, Eaton Vance, Fidelity, all had some good tax management. Basically, they're funds that are growth-oriented that minimize turnover in the portfolio. No turnover, no tax. Zero coupon bond, you know what that is? So in the old days, when you got a bond, you got a tear-off coupon. Zero coupon, there's no coupon. And a lot of times, those are things that mature in the future. So you'd buy a 10-year bond, and you pay no interest on it because it matures down the road. Even CDs you can buy where you pay no interest on it till 3 years later it matures, kind of thing. Rabbi trusts are available. I won't go into detail with that. If this fits you, give me a call. I'll tell you how to do it. But let me give you an example. I retired, and let's say that I set up my retirement, and I got a call from First Cumberland Presbyterian Church of Washington, D.C., which doesn't exist. And they said, we'd like you to come, and we're going to pay you a lot of money to come up here for a one-year interim. And I said, gosh, that's going to mess up my retirement. But I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll come, but I'm going to set up a rabbi trust, and I want you to put my money into the trust, and I'll take it later. And that's basically how that works. So it was set up originally by a rabbi, so it's eligible for any nonprofit. Then there's exchange-traded funds. If you get into alternate minimum gift taxing and all that kind of stuff, ETFs can be profitable. But again, talk to a financial planner. All right, next slide. Anybody here want to talk about annuities? Yes. Okay. All right, so annuities, let me get a sip of water here. Annuities can be a great tax vehicle, tax-deferred vehicle, but you have to understand that you're paying more for an annuity than you're paying if you just use an investment. The fees in an annuity are higher based on what you have in a provision inside the annuity. So let's just take one for example. If you buy an annuity that uses all American funds, or buy mutual funds that are all American funds, well, the American funds annual fee is closer to 0.4. It's not even half of 1 point annual fee. Whereas the annuity more than likely starts out at 1.4. And then on top of that, why would I buy the annuity? Because we're going to guarantee that it doesn't ever go down in value from a certain level. Okay, that's 1% more. Also, we're going to do some other provisions. So it could be the annuity ends up being 2.5%, 3% versus half to 1% on other fund. And you say, well, why would I do that? Well, if it's more important to you to be guaranteed an income in the future and make sure you don't lose your money, then it might be worth earning less. And so for a 10% return, your net is 7. Instead of a 10% return, your net's 9. And so that's where you're making those choices. The other thing about annuities is that they can be inside a retirement plan or outside a retirement plan. If they're outside the retirement plan, it's a good way for non-qualified funds, meaning that you can put money in. There's rarely caps of how much you can put in. It's all tax deferred till you take it out, but you are subject to not taking it until you're 59.5, or there's a 10% penalty from IRS. And when you take out money from an annuity, again, not inside of an IRA, not inside of a TSA, but if you're just doing the investment, you're going to be taking it as ordinary income. Money that comes out of an investment typically will come out at subject to capital gains tax, which is lower than ordinary income traditionally. So you're paying a little bit higher on the tax. But I do love annuities, and I have some myself. Just know what you're getting and make sure that that it's worth the dollars when you start measuring out. Do they cost more? Yes. Is it worth it to you? Fine. But like all investments, I wouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. You shouldn't have all annuities, and you shouldn't have all of any one thing. I assume that's rain, and that's great. And for those of you that are listening to our recording, the heat index was 117, now it's 146. Inheritance and windfalls. How do you move a windfall, like an inheritance, into retirement? There's a way to do that. Again, talk to planners, but let's say that somebody, Aunt Lucille dies and leaves you $40,000 and you say thank you. And if you're asking me, I'd probably say, well, pay off any debt you have first. Then after any debt, did you get your savings built up to where it's supposed to be? And then after you've done that, I'd probably say, well, let's take a big chunk of that and put it in your retirement. So how much can you put into your 403B a year? $23,500. How much can you do catch up? $7,500. If you're over 50, there's a lot of money that you could go to your church and say, take $30,000 out of my pay this year, and I'll be okay. I've got some money that's coming in, and just take less income and put all that money in through your church that way. And that way you kind of live off the 30 that's in your pocket. So there's ways to be creative to move a lot of money into retirement and take it all off your income tax at the same time. Next slide, retirement distributions, 59.5, normal age to take without penalty. There are exceptions. I've had people take it as early as 40. There are rules. So if you talk to a financial planner and says, can I take my money before 59.5? They say no. You say, are there exceptions? And if they say no, then you can find another financial planner, because there are ways to get your money out early. You just have to be creative. The required minimum distribution used to be 70.5. Right? April 1st, following year, you turn 70.5. Now it's changed to age 72. And this year it changes to 73. By 2033, it'll be 75. There's a penalty for not taking it. It used to be 50% tax. Now it's 25%. Soon there'll be automatic enrollment. Is this up there on the board? Good. Pretty soon there'll be automatic enrollment in 401ks. So here's what happens. The church doesn't have a 401k plan. Anybody here have a 401k? Okay, I'm talking to you. So if you're a new person that's enrolling in a 401k, a new employee, then they're going to go ahead and automatically have some default. Let's say it's 4%, and that their match is 4%, so they're putting in 4. And when you sign up, they're going to automatically put you in at 4, and then you have to contact the company to reduce it if you want to get out of it or reduce it. It's a way that the government has moved toward making people put more money aside. And you might even see incentive cards in the future of, if you enroll in the 401k plan, here's a dinner card or something like that. I mean, they're getting very aggressive. Let's look at the next slide, backdoor Roths. One of the things I ran into with clients a lot of times is that their income kept them from contributing to a Roth. Either they made too much money, it was phased out, or they're already in a 401k plan or something like that. My wife and I ran into this for years and used the back door for 20 years. The back door is this. So she's not eligible for an IRA. She's not taking enough income to more. She retired early as a nurse, and she wasn't taking any income. And I had plenty of income, but there's no way I could get it into her Roth because I made too much money. So what I did is I opened her up a non-deductible IRA, which is allowed. And once I opened up the non-deductible IRA, the next day I converted it to a Roth. All right? So there's ways to get around the rules. That's called a backdoor Roth. Rule of 72. So the mic's here. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to draw something. I'll come back. All right. How many people have heard of the rule of 72? All right? The rule of 72 is you take any interest rate, divide it into 72, and that's how long it takes your money to double. All right, what interest rate would y'all like to use? 5? 5 into 72 is what? Anybody? Is it 16? 1, 22, 4, it's about 15.4. All right, so we'll say 14. So every 14.4 years, your money doubles in value, okay? If you're making 10%, your money will double in how many years? 7.2. So would you rather your money double in 7 years? Yes, of course. Are you okay if 2 years out of the 10, it loses money? And that's the risk thing that you have to measure, because the longer period of time you have to go, the more risk you can take. The shorter period of time you have, the less risk you want to take. But you got to take some risk or you can't keep up with inflation. There's a rule called the reverse of 72. All right, the reverse of 72 is take any inflation rate, divide it into 72, and that's how long it takes your money to be worth half as much. What's the inflation rate you want to use? That means every 9 years your money's worth half as much. But you're being a little facetious because it's only been 8 for 2022 and it never has before. The average over time is 3, 2.5% to 3%. And we don't think we're going to stay at 8 by any means. I don't think we can. But if it's at 3, what is that, 26 years? Something like that? 22, we'll say 26. Now, here's the thing that's important. Whatever money you have right now, figure it up. And I'm going to do it by 100,000. Maybe I can do it in my head. But at 100,000, and you're leaving alone at 5%, you're going to have 200,000 in 14 years. If you average 10%, your 100,000 is going to be 200,000 in 7 years. You see how it works? And whatever you have today, by the time you retire, may only be worth half as much. So when people say, is $1 million enough to have in retirement? Well, it depends. When are you going to start taking it? How many people are living off of it? What other sources do you have to live off of? Some people, they can have far less. I'll give you a good example of that. I have a sister-in-law who's close to retiring from teaching school for 40 years, and she's lamenting about not having all this money. And I says, no, wait a minute. Your pension with the state is worth $1 million. It's worth $1 million because I'd have to have $1 million to produce the income that you're going to get out of that pension. So sometimes you don't have to have that dollar figure. It depends on what your other sources are. Military, teachers, civil servant. There's a lot of things out there. So all those need to be taken advantage of. I can tell you that the CP plan has averaged 9% over a 40-year period. Now, if you go into a smaller time frame, it's a lot less, but you want to be investing with the knowledge of the rule of thumb is this, that if you're planning on using the money in a year, stay in cash. If you're planning on spending it within 3 to 5 years, then you need to stay on the conservative side, like bonds, CDs, money market, things like that. And you're moving into the securities market based on long-term, which is 5 years plus. Next slide. Estate planning, a few comments on that. Confirm your beneficiaries are correct every 3 to 5 years. Loved ones might pass. You need to change. Grandkids grow up. Something happens. Maybe your charities. I had a case one time where a guy had a lot of money, and he and his wife decided on these 5 charities, and when she died, he changed it all to one charity. Make sure that you've got it fixed like you want it fixed, and that it's going to be that way even after things change beyond. Do you need a trust? Well, you need to see an attorney for that, but I would tell you that in all my years, you need a trust if you have a special needs child. You need a trust if you've got spendthrifts in your family, somebody you need to control assets from the grave with. You need a trust if you have a second marriage or a blended family. I'll give you an example. So you were married for 10, 15 years, had some kids, you got a divorce, you remarried, happily married, and you want your second wife or husband to have the house as long as they live, but then you want it to revert back to your kids. Well, you need a trust to do stuff like that and protect it to where you want it to go. Do you need a will? Again, see an attorney. Most of the attorneys I've worked with have always said everybody needs a will. And if you don't have one, then the state's will is what happens to your estate. Next slide, shred me not. The next slide, shred after 7 years. Tax receipts, tax-related canceled checks, W-2s, 1099, tax deduction records. Next slide, keep for life. Tax returns, birth certificates, Social Security cards, passports, death, birth, marriage certificates. Next slide, keep while useful, title to your car, till you trade it, deeds, till you don't own it, pay stubs, until it's not questionable anymore, disputed medical bill until it's not disputed, home improvement in case you need it for housing, right? Next slide, some helpful resources. SSA.gov, everybody needs to be familiar with that. And IRS.gov is also a good site if you have tax questions and a good search engine there. My favorite book is the Church and Clergy Tax Guide 2023. I would have brought it, but it's extremely heavy. It's more like an encyclopedia, and I flew, and I didn't want to carry it, but if I had driven, I would have brought it and showed it to you. But the reason I like this one, Dr. Hammer is so good. How good is he? Well, he is so good that sometimes when I have had a client that I told he could do this, and the church treasurer says you can't do that, and they checked with their CPA and says you can't do that, we've gotten on the phone with Dr. Hammer, and he says, well, here's the law that says you can. So he's the guy that literally wrote the book on Church and Clergy Tax Guide, and so I've used him a lot of times in resources. Also, he has another book out that is Clergy Comp, and I don't know, Clergy Compensation. And if you ever want to know how you measure up with your size church and your size area, your size city, your geographic place, he publishes a book every year with those that information. Very interesting. Be a good one for the library for pastoral development. I put Ministry and Money up there because that's one of the main textbooks the seminary uses. I was pleased to help them develop a program where Eli Lilly could pay money in an endowment, and they could offer classes and counseling to ministers coming in, and helped do that some years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And this is one of their textbooks, and I would call it a pretty good book. Then get on a newsletter with a reputable broker, not one that is going to send you just articles for the rich. Make sure that it fits in your classifications. I've seen some that tells you how to buy your yacht and stuff like that. And you want to make sure that they're giving you things you can use. And here's a place that you might do is you might go to companies that specialize in teachers or ministers or people that are in our vocation area, and you'll see articles more geared to that. Next slide is just the last slide, and then I'll take questions and answers. My advice is keep saving, invest wisely, work longer, delay taking, stay out of debt, beware of family. Beware of family. They're the ones that usually take your money, and sometimes meaning well, sometimes not. Thank you for the opportunity to share some things, and that's 43 years and 56 minutes. Thank you for your time, and I've enjoyed being here. Good luck with everybody.